If you're trying to incorporate more plants into your diet, but you can't because of how much gas or bloating it gives you, you are not alone. I went through that as well, and I want to talk about with you today how we can rebalance the body to digest plant foods correctly. Let's talk about that. Hi, I'm Pierce Whitley, your integrative health practitioner, bringing you weekly inspiration to help you pull up your health issues by the root. As we cultivate balance in our bodies, our soil will become inhospitable to symptoms. Welcome to Vitally Balanced. Yep, I was there too. I was eating a very processed food heavy diet, lots of grains, not many vegetables to speak of. And when I started getting into the health world, when I was learning more about this type of stuff, I started introducing plant foods en masse, and man, did it mess up my digestive system. Well, that didn't really mess up my digestive system. It was already messed up, but it sure felt like it did. And there were days that I was like, I don't know how I can go on with this. I want to eat healthier, but I can't deal with the debilitating amount of gas and bloating it caused. And it was terrible. But if you're in that same position, don't worry. There is a way to rebalance your body so that it can digest plant foods. And the fact that you're not able to digest them right now is simply your body telling you that something is wrong, specifically in your digestive system. If you don't have these symptoms right now, this podcast will have relevance for you as well, because again, when we talk about specific problems, they aren't just limited to the specific applications that we're talking about today. There are broad principles that we might be applying to our circumstances today with gas and bloating and gut dysbiosis, but that can have far reaching implications for your health. So stay tuned. And so let's dig into it. So, why would one be having gas and bloating from plant foods? Well, let's get some of the simple stuff out of the way first. When you're eating plant foods, plants have fiber, and they're typically tougher than processed food because they haven't already been milled and pre digested for you, basically. So, make sure to chew more than you think you should. And if you need to, cook some of the plant foods that you eat because that will make it easier to digest. So now that that's out of the way, let's talk about a main reason why a lot of people are getting gas and bloating. And what a lot of the world calls it is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO. We can also look at candida, or in other words, yeast overgrowth in the intestines, as another root cause of this. And there are other things as well, and these things also have deeper root causes. But the basic thing that we need to know is that if we are getting gas and bloating from these foods, it's because there's too much bacteria in the gut, most likely. And as our food is passing through, that bacteria is fermenting that food, and it produces a lot of gas when it does that. So we might be asking ourselves, where did that bacteria come from? Am I taking too many probiotics? And this bacteria isn't necessarily coming in from outside, but it's a product of our intestinal environment. Our intestines are supposed to regulate themselves in a way that the bacteria that grow there are beneficial to us, and we're beneficial to them. We give them food to eat, and they help us digest things that we can't digest. We have trillions of bacteria in our body, and I forget the exact statistic, but a like a non a notable portion of our weight is actually weight from bacteria that live inside us. So they're very beneficial. The problem comes though when those bacteria either become overgrown, or a bad bacteria disproportionately takes over too much of our gut. And so where can that come from? That's the big question. There are a couple different causes of intestinal dysbiosis or gut dysbiosis, and that's what we'll be calling the bacterial imbalances in our gut today. One of them could be antibiotic use. When you use antibiotics, they can definitely save your life, and I'm not saying they don't have a place, but a lot of times they're used too often in our modern medicine world today. And when we use antibiotics, it doesn't just target the one bacteria we're wanting to get rid of. It targets everything. Antibacterials aren't, or antibiotics aren't specific to certain bacteria. I had strep infections in my throat a lot when I was a little kid. And so I took antibiotics almost every year for them. There are people that take antibiotics a lot more. And what that does, every time you take them, it's going to wipe out the bacterial population in your gut. And what happens when you do that is then there's a big blank canvas for bacteria to regrow into. And the problem happens when an opportunistic bacteria, detrimental bacteria that are bad for our gut environment, when they decide to take back over all that empty space. And also bacteria can get overgrown that way as well. And the whole balance of our intestines gets thrown off because the bacteria also, in a way, regulate the environment as well. There are certain bacteria that are more prevalent in our small intestine, which is most of what we have here in our bellies. When you pat on your belly, most of that bulk there is your small intestines, and they're all kind of curled up in this ball. That part of your intestines are supposed to be mostly pretty sterile compared to what we might think. There is a strain of bacteria there called lactobacilli that produce substances that keep that area of our intestines more sterile and prevents other bacteria from encroaching in on it. But again, when we wipe out all the bacteria with antibiotics and they all grow back, there's no guarantee that the lactobacillus bacteria are the ones that are going to colonize there in our guts. And then there are a couple other ways that we can have intestinal dysbiosis. If we're eating the wrong types of foods, we can be preferentially feeding the bad bacteria. And if a lot of times people are very stressed these days as well, if we're very stressed, the sphincter that separates our small intestine from our large intestine can get stuck open a little bit. Not necessarily stuck, but it doesn't close properly. And that's called the ileocecal valve. And when our ileocecal valve isn't closing, a lot of the bacteria from the large intestine can come back up through our small intestine. And the large intestine is a lot less sterile than our small intestine. It's the large intestine kind of goes up and around your body, and it wraps around and then back down, back to where you excrete your stool. And if that bacteria is crawling back up through your small intestine, that's not going to be good either. And so there are a lot of things that can cause intestinal dysbiosis, and we're not even going to go over all of them today. But just to look at a couple other common things that can lead to this intestinal bacterial imbalance or this intestinal dysbiosis, not just antibiotics, but we can look at things like birth control, alcohol, artificial sweeteners, mercury, high processed sugar diets, stress, like we talked about, and even pregnancy. A lot of things can lead to intestinal dysbiosis, but the only thing that's more important than how we got here is where are we going from here. It does matter how you got there, but the more important thing is what are we going to do now? And there are a couple different things that you can do, and not all of them are super easy, and there's not really a simple solution, but there is a process. And the process that I use and that I have used to rebalance my gut is first you have to start with figuring out what your problem is. Are we dealing with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth? Are we dealing with yeast overgrowth? Are we dealing with a different type of gut issue? We need to figure out before we can begin to rebalance the body what is out of balance. Because if we start trying to rebalance something in the body and that thing was never out of balance to begin with, it's just going to cause more imbalance and could make things worse. So the first thing that I like to start out with is lab testing. Some lab tests that I like to use to look at what could possibly be wrong in our guts is first off a urinary organic acids test. This is a urine test that you take. It's all done at home. All of these lab tests are. And you put your first morning urine into a collection tube and send it off, and they will analyze the metabolites or the byproducts that are present in your urine to determine what is living in your gut, because these bacteria produce byproducts and they will get excreted in your urine. And so one of the best ways to tell what is in your gut is by what they excrete. And it's also going to look into energy markers and vitamin markers for your nutrition status. Very amazing things that you can find out from this test. So that's one of the tests that we use. Another test that we'll use often is a stool test. And so now we're actually looking for the actual bacteria in your gut, and we can see what types of bacteria are there. Is there an overgrowth of them? And what types of bacteria are there? Are we having mostly beneficial bacteria, or are there some opportunistic pathogenic bacteria that are present? And we can also look there on stool tests for parasites and H. pylori as well. All different opportunistic organisms that can take up residence in your digestive system and stick there and cause you problems. And then another thing that a lot of times we'll use is a food sensitivity test. And a food sensitivity is different than an allergy, and it definitely will take a whole podcast of its own. But essentially, food sensitivities are longer term immune reactions to foods that you're eating. And we can also test immune reactions to things like yeast. And so we can figure out, is your immune system having a reaction to yeast? And that will help us figure out if it's present in your body as well. And so after we figured out what is going on, we can then begin to use proper therapies to help rebalance the body's environment. Because remember, the reason it was out of balance in the first place is because your environment was not conducive to good bacteria growing there. And the environment in your gut allowed bad bacteria to grow there. And so we need to help rebalance the environment in your gut, and then your gut will begin to rebalance its microbiome. But we also need to help give it a little bit of a push. And so a lot of things we'll use are biofilm disruptors. These basically dissolve the hiding spots that bacteria and yeast build for themselves and expose them. And then we'll use herbal antimicrobials to help kill off some of these bacteria or yeast. And then we will also use probiotics. And so probiotics will come in, and they don't necessarily take up residence in your gut. They don't stay there, but they will pass through. And as they pass through, they're going to positively influence the rest of your gut. So that's kind of a three-pronged approach that we take, is the biofilm disruptors to expose the bacteria or the microbes. And then we use antimicrobials to go in and push them out. And then we use probiotics to help rebuild back up and positively influence your microbiome. And there are other products that we use as well. That's just a broad overview. And there's other specific things that we can use for parasites and H. pylori. And wanting to restate again that none of these things, we're not treating a disease. We're not treating small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or parasites. We're helping to rebalance the body and give it the help that it needs to come back to a properly balanced microbiome. And now, along with these therapeutic nutritional supplements, we also are going to need to make changes in your diet and lifestyle. We need to remove what was causing bacterial overgrowth in the first place. For example, if you're drinking alcohol all the time and that's contributing to yeast overgrowth, we're going to need to work that down. And in the meantime, while we're helping to rebalance the gut, we might need to change your diet, because certain foods can feed this overgrowth too much, and they can feed yeast and things like that. And so we need to change your diet for a certain amount of time to allow these things to rebalance. And then afterwards, we can add in the foods that you want to have. There was a period of time I couldn't eat onions, I couldn't eat garlic, I couldn't eat asparagus. I couldn't eat a lot of leafy greens because they just gave me too many problems. I can eat all those things now, but it does take a little bit of time to rebalance your body first. And now I realize that a lot of these things aren't super duper actionable for you right now. They do require a little bit more resources than the typical person has available. Lab testing, really deep personalized supplement protocols, things like that, and specialized diets aren't necessarily something that's very intuitive for the average person. Definitely wasn't intuitive for me. It's something that needs to be learned. A lot of people don't really want to invest the time or the money required to learn these things. So something that I offer is private health coaching. And that's where I, as someone who has been through all of this and has learned all of these things and has access to lab testing and things like that, where I can help you with these same things that I have used to heal myself. So if any of you are interested in working with me one-on-one, I'd encourage you to head over to the link in the description and check out my private health coaching practice, where again, I help people heal themselves as I have healed myself. and the body does have an amazing innate capacity to heal. We just need to give it the tools and enable it. So if this podcast has helped you, or you feel like would help someone else that you know, because I'm pretty sure everyone either has gut problems or knows someone that has gut problems, make sure to send it over to them. I know that I definitely appreciated things like this when I was working on healing. And as always, I will see y'all next Thursday.